I'm James Howell, and this is 11th Heaven Critical Suplex, an extended look at Grasshopper Manufacture's 2007 game No More Heroes, written and directed by Suda51. Heaven 2, Dr. Peace with Ryan Payton. In this video, before I speak with our guest, we're going to look at how the overworld sets up economic exploitation and fulfillment as opposites that Travis has to balance much in the same way that he balances reality and fantasy. We've got one super important stop along the way, though. There's a lot happening in this opening cutscene that I want to unpack. Most games, even with blank slate protagonists, distance the player from the character by giving the character bodily privacy. You know, we never see Link go to the bathroom. But No More Heroes pushes the player-character bond to make the player share Travis's life right down to details that we ourselves might consider our most private. Obviously, this contributes to the comedic character of the game, but it has a secondary effect of reinforcing the bond between Travis and the player.
Am I ready? Anytime.
We control his body in combat, and so the game shares as much of that body as it can show.
Gotcha.
We watch Travis apply every layer of polish that makes him into the character we control, cleaning out his insides, performing basic hygiene, and getting into costume. We're not privy to the specific act of masturbation, of course, but we're put in the presence of Travis's masturbation paraphernalia, and we can see comic glimpses into his sex life.
This is Diane from Beefhead Videos, just calling to let you know that one of the videos returned yesterday wasn't one of ours. It doesn't have a label on it, but it seems to be a recording of a guy humping a pillow.
So the game puts us as in touch with Travis's body even there as it can, while also keeping an acceptable rating.
Moe.
And Travis knows we're here. He doesn't acknowledge the player directly very often, but he does so in the tutorial and at the end of our introduction to his living space. By contrast, Travis is aghast that someone would invade his privacy while he's on the can at the end of the game.
Guy get some privacy? At least when he's taking a dump?
But he's conscious of the player's presence during those same moments without protest. During the parts of the game when we're just sharing Travis's daily life, when we're not in combat or anything, the most intimate point of contact is through his wardrobe, which is one of my favorite parts of this game. I really like the sense of style, particularly his collection of t-shirts that remind me of, if you visit another city and you go to a Salvation Army, you'll find shirts donated from local Knights of Columbus baseball teams or something, and those are little odd treasures to take back home because they're out of context. It's kind of the same feeling I get when I get a package and it's been packed with newspaper from another state. This cast-off feeling of Travis's wardrobe is one of the things that gives No More Heroes its punk edge. That homemade feeling, that clothing isn't bought in outfits, but is bought in pieces, and, in Travis's case, actually just found. And it's to be assembled in whatever way seems right at the time. I really like giving found things an unexpected new life. It's like a collaboration with fate that lets go of certain unnecessary degrees of control, and a lot of times you have to make the things you like yourself out of what's on hand because no one's made them yet. So in that spirit, I'll be changing Travis's outfit each episode. Certainly that sense of style can be an affectation, but it comes somewhat naturally when you're without means, which Travis certainly is. Both our introduction to Travis's hotel room and this follow-up cutscene in Sylvia's limo reinforce what we could infer from the death metal fight. Travis's socioeconomic status is integral to his character as one of the qualities that sets him apart from his competitors. The game sequence that follows this cutscene introduces us to the game's overworld. During the back and forth between the Job Center and the Assassin's Guild, we find out that the overworld game is based entirely upon Travis's exploitation as a lower-class outsider without power or money. Travis has to pay to enter the competition, and he can't leave the competition because now the 11th ranked assassin will be gunning for him. Travis can choose not to pay, but he'll die without experiencing any of the benefits of his position, so that's really a false choice. The entry fee is exorbitant, and Sylvia says that this is for her overhead, but we find out during the Dr. Peace fight that his money actually went toward getting Dr. Peace a high-class dinner and reserving the stadium for his song.
Who got you the reservation?
The association took care of it, of course.
Fuck. My entry fee.
Dr. Peace explicitly discusses class when he talks about the exclusivity of inner circles.
What's important is not the fact the reservations are hard to get. In fact, no one gets reservations. The words reservations only apply only to those outside of the circle. It's getting into that circle that matters.
And he openly disparages the morality of those inner circles by saying that their food tastes like blood.
And the food. Good?
Oh, the food tasted like blood.
Which is quite a judgment coming from somebody with his background. This seems to build off of Travis's overworld hassle of getting cash to gain access to the ranking fight. It paints both Dr. Peace and Travis as outsiders who participate in the insider's game. Though Dr. Peace is more of an insider than Travis, since Travis's money ultimately funnels into his pleasures. So there's a lot here. The portrayal of bourgeois exclusivity and refinement as a kind of violence, the scam of having to pay money to participate in a game that Travis has no meaningful choice to opt out of, which anyone with student loan debt should understand well, and the forced flow of cash from lower-class labor to upper-class luxury. As we see during the Overworld tutorial, this is literally a runaround for Travis. By playing the Overworld game, the player experiences the exploitation of Travis's time and labor. And this exploitation is, of course, the heart of the scam that Sylvia is running with the UAA. Now, to be clear, No More Heroes is not a Marxist allegory, and I don't think that it's moralizing here. Travis's exploitation here is balanced by the fulfillment that he gets from participating in that system, which makes it less of a scam and more of a business arrangement, with scammy qualities. Travis has his own motivations to play into his exploitation because he wants something from the UAA, which the UAA mostly gives him. He wants to find the person who killed his family. He wants to master his fighting ability for the sake of mastery, and this blood market gives him the opportunity to do so. And, of course, he wants to have sex with Sylvia. And that third one he doesn't get, but 2 out of 3 is not bad. Travis actually enjoys part of the process of playing along with the system because he enjoys being an assassin, and actually he even has the opportunity to eviscerate those who build their lives on top of his labor, as he will do with Dr. Peace. Travis has dropped out of mainstream social systems like education and career ascension, and he's even dropped out of mainstream culture in his anime tastes and that punk style. But now he's accepting the UAA's yoke because it, unlike other systems, can give him something that he wants. This relates back to the contradictions that I described in the previous video. Exploitation and fulfillment are opposing ideas. Travis is not a victim here precisely because he negotiates between the two. After the Dr. Peace fight, he knows he's being exploited, but he finds out who he is by walking that line between letting others take from him and getting what he wants, which is the chance to kill them. In the end, he gets what he wants, mostly by avenging his family and becoming number 1, Sylvia never sleeps with him, and he stays in his motel room without climbing socially.
It's finally over.
The UAA is its own miniature economy of exchange that ultimately gives him what he needs, which is closure for the loss of his family, rather than what he wants. Travis reaches that closure and understands who he is by negotiating between the opposing forces of exploitation and fulfillment. And that brings us to the end of the analysis portion of this video. Now I'm going to step over to the interview mic and join our guest. Joining me today is Ryan Payton, head of Camouflaj Studios and director of the critically acclaimed stealth thriller Republique, formerly with Kojima Productions and 343. Ryan, welcome.
Thanks, James.
Yes, I provide writing for the game Republique as well. Jams is kind of a nickname there. Yeah, I've written a lot of in-game stuff that's directly attributable to the villain, the Overseer, like the banned books and some of the puzzles, and other things besides.
And the Manifesto.
And the Manifesto as well, yes. It's a great game. Yeah, everyone check it out.
Hop to it.
But yeah, I know both of us are huge fans of Suda games. In preparation for this project, I was doing some research on Suda's work with the Kill the Past series of games. The prior Silver Incident,
Right.
Flower, Sun, and Rain, and Killer 7. And from what I've read, Killer 7 was sort of his first exposure to a major international audience.
Yeah, I think that's correct.
And so it's interesting that the game following up on that is it seems like maybe a response to that in some ways. You know, really inserting itself in that space between an American audience and Japanese media.
You know, I think this is, definitely No More Heroes was the ambition was to go wider, was to go bigger, to grow Grasshopper as a company into a much bigger entity, more known worldwide than even maybe so in Japan.
Right.
And to their credit, and I think to the credit of Ubisoft, like they achieved that. I don't know the numbers obviously, but I'm assuming that No More Heroes is in the history of Grasshopper games will stand as one of their better selling titles.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, it's the one that spawned a series.
Yeah.
So that's credit to it right there. So what really speaks out to you about these games, about these Suda games and Grasshopper titles in general?
I think one of the reasons I was really attracted to Grasshopper and their titles is because, for better or for worse, it's oftentimes been style over substance. And then I think you have on the opposite end of it would be like a God Hand, which is very mechanics driven,
yeah.
And where I can't really sink my teeth into the quote unquote style of it or how cool it is. I wouldn't argue that the game is really cool, even if you look at that front box cover. It's just like, what is this? What is this thing? I don't really. It's not really speaking out or saying anything. I think that's really of meaning, again, from like a story or stylistic perspective. But again, from a mechanics perspective, it's really interesting and really deep. And so I remember always wanting to see Grasshopper retain that certain unique style that they had, but continue to go dig deeper and deeper and deeper into gameplay, right? Because I think that's where they would hit that perfect balance.
Right.
And I think you can see that in No More Heroes to a certain degree. I think in a lot of ways it is a step up from Killer 7. In terms of at least the ambition is there in terms of what they're trying to do, which is it's like open world and be more of like a third person action slasher.
Yeah, they made a solid brawler.
Yeah, that's good on them.
Yeah, and also for me, because Killer 7 is my favorite video game in terms of style and content, and God Hand is my favorite game mechanically. So like, if there ever was a marriage between the two and a baby, this is that baby.
Right? Yeah, no doubt about it.
I also love the colors.
Yeah, no, the color palette I think is a really nice evolution from what they're looking at, what they did with Killer 7, adding some more detail, but still being style with a certain degree of stylistic polish. And these kind of transition sequences too that they're using, as far as I know, it came in pretty late. And
really?
I think they add a lot to the experience. There's lots of those, especially that little the thing at the end after you finish a boss too, the kind of Galaga inspired ranking thing that also came in pretty late, but again adds to the whole kind of nerdy culture of it, right?
Yeah, that's pretty amazing because those are two of the things that I think are some of the most sort of stylistically iconic aspects.
Right.
I mean, if you're playing a game that's disc based and you're not like off solid state drive or whatever, you're going to be seeing a lot of loading screens. And that style for loading screen that's one of the things that people see the most frequently and the most of. And it's kind of amazing that came in late.
I wonder if it had to do with load times, but also just traditionally audio and UI tend to come in towards the very end of projects. And those are the kind of like the last bits of polish you can get in without having to worry about completely breaking the game with new fixes coming in.
Right, that makes sense. You know, No More Heroes has that kind of homemade craft, street art theme to it, even in ways that might be somewhat incidental, like the frame rate sometimes drops a bit and it gets a little bit choppy and chugs a bit. It has like kind of a ragged edge feeling that it fits the overall aesthetic everywhere else.
It does, and I think it fits. It's consistent with where Grasshopper was, especially at the time, which was, hey, if Gran Turismo is like U2, right, and ultra polished and sell millions of records and everything, and the presentation is just pixel perfect or whatnot, then Grasshopper is like the punk rock version of that. Like they're like a punk, they're a punk band, and even they would even say that in their marketing messaging and like stickers and things like that they would put out. So there's definitely, like you said, I believe a rough edge and a rough quality to it. Partly because of the lack of staff, or maybe the budget wasn't as big as other titles. But I think they really embraced it, and I think that's one of the charms of Grasshopper titles.
Yeah, absolutely. It's something I've noticed is a difference between the Wii version and the Heroes Paradise version.
Right.
From the credits I saw on that, it looks like that port was handled by a studio in addition to Grasshopper. That they kind of like gave them the files and said, okay, port this to PS3. Right. So there was it's really smooth and looks like it's got a very clean presentation, which feels very weird for a game like No More Heroes.
Right. Yeah. Sometimes the remasters don't capture the same feel as the original titles, right?
Yeah. Those details really make up a lot of the character of the game, and No More Heroes is a game full of details. I mean, even right down to how much we learn about Travis and what we see about him.
Yeah, no, this is really cool. You got to get a window into his weird lifestyle. It's that level of meticulous detail that I think we all appreciate from Japanese games.
Yeah.
These features that in any kind of other Western studio would rightfully get cut because of just concerns about overscope, or what do we really gain from this? Like, what's the net positive? Can we reuse these set pieces and things like that? Are the appropriate questions that would come out? And that's one of the things I've always loved about Japanese games, is they can kind of get away with some of the more non sequitur, just things that just are part, just add to the flavor of the entire experience.
Yeah, absolutely. For somebody who's very attentive to detail, it's very affirming in a way to see that level of attention given to a high-level project like on a Japanese-developed adventure game.
Yeah, and again, that's why I always love working with Japanese developers, because for the most part, they're very detail-oriented, and I don't feel strange bringing up these things. And I always, whether it was at Konami or at Grasshopper or other places, I always felt at home with these folks, because they were just as obsessed about the details as I was, and I didn't have to be apologetic about it. Something not to say anything negative about any other place I'd worked out in the West, including our own studio right now, but I remember that being something of an adjustment I had to make in terms of what the Japanese developers would really care about, those level of details, and then what Western developers would just call up as like, okay, now you're just being too detail oriented, or we need to move forward. Like, who cares about these smaller details?
Right. Yeah, as somebody who enjoys taking as in this project here, enjoys taking a detailed, critical look at a lot of games, the Japanese games have definitely been very rewarding in that regard because of that consistency. And I mean, for my own sake, I don't think it would be unfair to say that the fact that I have been a fan of those games, and the fact that those games have kind of taught me how to pay attention to things in games, because they've been my main sort of food, certainly lend to that mindset. If the kinds of games that you have as your primary example of video games are extremely detail-oriented, have that kind of internal cohesion, that's only natural, but that's the kind of thing you're going to want to kind of turn around and make in turn.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. And that's why when you see these billboards in this game and other games that I've worked on, they always are just a point of, I still have PTSD every time I see these, because these oftentimes don't go through checks. Right, these are just 2D artists, Japanese guys and gals are just looking at references online and are just kind of riffing on them. Mm-hmm. And oh man, like I've caught things in the past, and I'm always nervous, even when I see it in the final build, because I'm like, okay, what got through without any kind of check? those always make me really nervous.
Right.
Because those for obvious reasons don't go through the same scrutiny as a script would. Right.
Right. Yeah. I guess depending upon the pace of communication and how quickly things are moving at that time can make it easier for things to go unnoticed that might otherwise have been given more of a check over. You chose Dr. Peace as your preferred boss fight to talk about. What draws you to him in particular? I just
remember being really impressed with the level and the idea for the boss battle in particular. And that's probably the reason why it's stood out mostly for me.
Was it the boss design or the story background?
The performance and the back and forth. It's just so ridiculous and so unique to, I think, Suda-san and the Grasshopper team that, just when I think back to my involvement in the project, I just always come back to that boss battle in particular.
On what you'd mentioned, of course, you were involved in the project, kind of off the radar. How were you involved with it, and how did that come about?
Okay, so yes, it was a number of years ago. So I'm apologies in advance if I'm forgetting some of the details, but I remember just befriending Goichi Suda primarily as a friend. We had a mutual friend and my former boss at Kojima Productions, but also just because and I continue to be a massive fan of Killer 7.
Yeah. And
so it was just so great to be able to meet him and kind of talk about his new game. And I remember being really excited about No More Heroes, especially following that kind of teaser trailer that they'd done way back. I think it might have been at Tokyo Game Show.
Oh yeah, it was like all CG and had that really early VA.
Yes, and I even I noticed that they reused that. I don't think I remember seeing that in development, but when I watched your first video, I saw that they were reusing it as part of just in-game assets to kind of tell the story, which I thought was kind of a cool idea.
Yeah, they weave that in during Travis's bike ride to the tutorial, where he's kind of giving the player a rundown on this is the setup. I want to be number one, and then it does some flashback stuff to that. Yeah, so I remember being just so excited, and again, just looking at that trailer, I was really intrigued by what he was doing, and then I don't remember exactly how it came to be, but again, with my boss's permission, I offered to kind of help them out. After I'd finished my normal job at Konami, I would take the train over to Shinkoenji and to their offices there, and just kind of see them. They were working really late every single night, and I'd go over there maybe about 9 or 10 o'clock at night and just kind of check in and see how things are going, to see if there's anything I can do to help. Right.
And the areas of help, obviously, that I could provide are mostly at that time especially, was on the localization or on the English language side of things. And so I would just kind of look at the cinematics, look at the script, offer up advice in terms of how things could get better, whether facial performance looked believable or not. But even before that, I remember getting access to the script and not being super happy with what I had seen, because I was so impressed with the script of Killer 7. It had that unique balance of okay, this is clearly a Japanese game, and there's some really weird Japanese nuances, but it was still a really good and well-performed script, and the voiceover performances that Chris Zimmerman had done were just outstanding. The actor performances were just off the charts. It was so good, and I was really hoping, I wanted to see make sure that same level was with No More Heroes. So when I saw that script, I was just about to go to get recording. I kind of had to put my foot down and say, hey guys, I'm just not just a friend here giving you advice anymore. You can't go to the recording studio with this script. You need to give me some time. Yeah. So I really inserted myself into the development with my nights and weekends and try to get the script into a better place.
Really?
Yes.
I had no idea.
Yeah, I haven't really talked about it publicly because, they don't want to. There's really no point in it, really.
Sure. Well, that's super cool and, of course, impressive to me. I mean, Suda games are among my favorite AAA games ever for exactly the reason you said. There's the weirdness. It's automatically a little weird because it's a Japanese game and there's a cultural sort of mismatch there that creates kind of that weirdness by default. But there's also a degree of weirdness that's special to it that you won't find in other Japanese media also.
Right, exactly. Yeah, no, it's so fascinating to see just their perspective on international politics, or even their own domestic politics, or just simply what twisted kind of variation they have on Southern California, namely Santa Monica, right?
Yeah. With it sounds like based off what you're saying, your introduction to the development in terms of being kind of an assertive presence was with the script and with the writing. I guess at what point did your engagement with the writing sort of match your engagement with the visuals? At what point did you get a sense of the game as a visual or hands-on object rather than just something to file a script paper?
If I remember correctly, it must have been a number of months in between there but there wasn't a lot of time. Because I got the script literally weeks before it was going to recording, and and that became a huge issue. And I could tell a little bit longer story about that. But basically, again, I had looked at the script, and I didn't think it didn't seem like it was at the level of quality that Killer 7 was at.
Yeah.
And I couldn't promise to get to that level, but I said I could help out because again, there was just straight up really bad grammar. Looking at the Japanese script and just really inconsistent, and I thought the fans would be pretty upset if they found out. So I volunteered, and I had a friend of mine would also kind of look over my shoulder and make sure everything was looking good. But I would just spend a weekend or two just going through the whole thing meticulously, trying to get the same feel and tone, but actually try to retain a lot of that very Japanese translated feel of the script, again, without having a lot of the grammatical errors, which Killer 7 for the most part didn't have, right?
Yeah.
I remember spending a lot of time on the script. I got it to a place where I was pretty happy with, and without naming names, there was an individual involved in the project that, for good reason, as an influencer in the project, and hearing that there's some outsider American guy just wants to completely edit the script was I think, again, rightfully suspicious of that whole idea.
Right.
And basically kind of stepped in and said, I don't think we're going to do this. I think we're going to go and we're going to record with the original script.
Oh, no.
And I was really nervous because not only did I work really hard on it, but more importantly, I was just really worried about the quality of the script. And so I, again, after work and trying to I was focused so much on Metal Gear, but I did have to take some time out of my schedule to walk myself over to this office and go talk to this guy and kind of walk him through like the fact that, you could trust me with this thing. I know it's hard for you to look at both scripts and understand which is which. In fact, he was trying to do that. He was looking at the Japanese translation. He would look at the English, or he would look at the original Japanese script, look at the English translation, and he would be marking them up and saying, no, this one's more accurate, this one's more accurate. And that's not something that you can really do unless you're a really, truly bilingual. He was saying, your script is better in this areas, but the other script was better in other areas. And again, he wasn't able to see all the grammatical issues. And yeah, so just because it's a more of a literal translation doesn't always necessarily mean it's better, right?
Yeah. So
anyway, I talked to Suda, and he was very supportive, but ultimately what I had to do was I was able to convince him by doing a test. So here we are with Dr. Peace. Maybe we should pause my story for a second and kind of enjoy this scene.
Yes.
I love this scene so much.
I do too. This is when I saw this scene. The tutorial is its own special kind of thing, but
right.
But when I saw this, I've thought like, oh my god, I am right back at home in Killer 7. It's that weird flamboyance of style that just it's so good. Like the idea that you could have this bloodthirsty professional black market crooked cop who legitimately is a beautiful singer, and that's what he does.
Yeah. I don't know where they found the voice actor. I can't remember his name, but this is a slam dunk.
Did the same VA playing the character also sing the song?
I don't know. I'm assuming yes,
because the voices match up very well. I know that sometimes with I know with some movies, if there's a part that requires singing, if the actor or actress is not particularly trained well in that regard, and if they're just not getting it, they'll get somebody who kind of just can match up. But,
yeah, I mean, traditionally with Chris, the voiceover director, she's really good about sourcing like great talent and she could find people that can sing if you need to.
Huh. Super cool.
Yeah, in fact, it became something of an issue in Metal Gear Online, one of your favorite games, because there were some singing sequences, and a lot of the actors who were already predetermined were very nervous about that.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah, you could make it a chorus or a single straight. Right. I don't think I've ever encountered another use of song like that in a game.
Yeah, it's definitely a unique feature. But to go back to the story, though, I had got a localization company to agree to do an A/B test that didn't have my name attached to it, didn't have the original script names attached to it, and we gave them A and B, and we asked them to go over it as a team and vote like which one is better, right? And the response was once it came in and the official results came in was that, do we even need to give an answer? It is that obvious, right?
Right.
And so once they saw that, they said, "Okay, fine, you win. You can have it your way," or whatever." And I was just trying to, it was fine. I was happy with it, but I thought it was kind of silly that they made it come across as like Ryan is just getting his way. I was like, no, I don't care about me getting my way. I don't have my name on the game or anything. It's just more or less about making the game, of higher quality, and that's something that the fans are going to enjoy more.
Right. That's something that's actually somewhat stunning, is because your name is not on the game. would never have known that you had that that degree of input on it. So was the that translation test was for that person's comfort, so they could feel
Yeah.
okay about, that they wouldn't basically be giving the project over to somebody who would not be accountable and also would make it worse.
Exactly, and again, if I was in this position, I'd probably ask for the same thing. If
Right.
somebody had come to me and said, "Hey, the Chinese localization of your script is really bad. I'm going to fix it for you." I'm like, who are you? For one. Now, then again, though, when I started rattling off, like, "Hey, this is what I do for, this is my professional job," like that didn't seem to move the barometer at all either. So, but again, we were able to compromise and have it come down to like a test, which is kind of a blind test, which I thought was completely fair.
As you said with this game following Killer 7, I mean, Killer 7 has one of I think the best localizations,
Yep.
which is remarkable because the localization stepped up to the quality of the game, and that's a really good instance of a game having the quality of attention that it deserves, and that's as opposed to something like Alexander Smith, who is I'm a huge fan of his work, and sometimes you get the feeling that maybe he's adding a little bit more. He does a really good job inserting kind of literary or skillfully pseudo-literary style into these pop culture translations. He did like Vagrant Story, Final Fantasy XII, the retranslation of Final Fantasy Tactics on the PSP. But things like that, and the bestiary for Final Fantasy XII was written very dryly in Japanese, I recall. But you would never know that from the English version because, he took a lot of stylistic affectations from actual 12th century bestiaries and applied them there. It's really, the end effect is quite beautiful. That's a very sharp translation. But the point with the Killer 7 though is you get the feeling that it's not that this is like the quality of the language is up to the quality of the writing. And
Yeah, I think it's like you're describing. It's definitely an art, and on the one hand, as fans of Japanese games, you want to have the most literal translation possible because you want to know what the intent and the true meaning behind it is. And I think as somebody who's been on both sides of it, it can be frustrating at times as you're trying to dissect the game, especially if you don't understand the Japanese language, because you're really at the whims of however that translator at that time decided to communicate this. Again, with using like a foreign reference that wasn't actually a part of the original script to make it more localized and make it more familiar for the Western audiences, or if it's if they have like a more literal translation, then you're closer to the metal, so to speak.
Right.
But maybe it's not as an entertaining script, right? And so that's always, I think, the trick, and which is why, again, I was so happy to be working off of For No More Heroes. I was so happy to be working off of a Japanese person's translation, because again, it has that kind of DNA in it throughout.
Weirdly enough, I can actually sympathize with that because that was when I was doing Delta Head stuff. A lot of the copy that I got as for like a final English pass was from Yoshiko and working with Jarrell on that. So there was that kind of feeling of that first, those little artifacts that might have been smoothed over by somebody who's a native speaker were there in the rough. So there was it's more fun to sort of feel like you have a choice. Right. Between the weirdness or something played straight. Mm-hmm. But yeah.
My objective was to retain as much of it as I could. With a few exceptions, I tried not to put in anything that it was just kind of original ideas that had kind of popped into my head.
Right. So did you take part much in the voice recording sessions? I mean, I guess I'm just thinking, like, if you worked on MGS4, you would have known Chris Zimmerman from that.
So I don't remember if she was scheduled even to be the voiceover director or not. I do have some memories of that not being the case, and how hard that I had to fight to make sure that she was going to be the director for No More Heroes. Again, I might be making that up, but I do remember having to fight something related to the session and of her involvement, I want to say. But in terms of the actual recording itself, I didn't intend any of those. Partly because of conflict of interest. Like I had promised to just help them out with the script and a couple other things. That to me is like a whole other thing in terms of committing a couple weeks of time to that project. It just wouldn't have been fair to my employer at the time and to the Metal Gear project. And
right.
But also that being said, Chris is so capable that I had zero concerns that she was going to just do a great job with the voice cast, who were also really, really, really incredible.
Oh, I'm super curious. So, did you do anything with the letters that Travis finds from the elusive MS, where he gets new wrestling moves?
Oh, the letters, right? That when I was watching your first video, I don't remember ever seeing that until that video. So I wonder if that's something that came in late.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, they that is really interesting because those again are kind of those are some of the more iconic things.
Well, yeah, just even looking at it reminds me of Killer 7 and the missives that you get from the pigeons.
Yeah. This game has a pigeon letter too.
Oh, it does. I didn't even know that.
It's not quite woven into the texture like the the pigeon letters are these things that you recur that recur. You get several of them in Killer 7. This one, it's a cutscene and a pigeon flies in through your window. There's a cartoony sound effect and that delivers a letter to Travis like that.
Oh yeah, there's a part of the game where you receive a letter. I want to say it was from Sylvia, and you can actually read the letter in her handwriting. Right? I want to say it's later in the game. And it's a prop in the game that you can kind of look over his shoulder and see. And so I remember looking at that when I was checking all the cinematics, and I remember letting the team know there that this isn't going to fly because it's clearly it's very clear that like a Japanese person had written this and that the cursive as they're trying to simulate what Sylvia was saying is not either it was because it was clearly Japanese or it was clearly like not a female. This is not lady's handwriting basically.
Right.
And so I remember calling my mom and saying, hey, can you, in a very feminine way, can you write a letter and here's the script I need you to write and write on a single piece of paper and we're going to scan it. and she did that. So wherever that is in the game, that's my mother's handwriting.
Are you serious? Oh my God, that's great.
Again, I don't remember where in the script it is.
Oh wow. So yeah, multiple Paytons uncredited on the project.
There's a similar instance of that in Metal Gear Solid 4 near the end of the game where there's a wedding and we didn't have a prop for a Bible, and if we did, it was something that we can just buy at a local store, and it just looked too new. It didn't look used, and that the pastor hadn't been using it. So I'd asked my mom if she had like an old Bible sitting around somewhere in the house, and sure enough, she did, and she sent me a bunch of pictures, and we used that, and we scanned into the game, and that's the prop that you find in the game.
Huh. That is resourceful.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it didn't. In a way, it really didn't surprise me because considering we're in Japan, it's a religion I think with less than 1% of the population.
Yeah.
Faithful to. So right. So it did. If anything, I would have been surprised if they had like a good old like King James Bible sitting around the office. Like that would have probably shocked me a lot more than what ended up happening.
Right. No, it's like appropriate to this game. It's not like something you can go into a hotel, open up a drawer, and take a few pictures of.
Yeah, exactly.
When you handed off the script for the VA stuff, did you sort of bow out after that?
You could put my involvement in the project into two phases. One was the frantic editing and script preparation work leading up to the recording,
mm-hmm.
and then there was some time in between there. And then when the voiceovers were delivered and we're working on the final cinematics and things like that, that's when I came in again and worked with them on timing, on the facial performances, make sure that the lip sync was lining up. And then also helping them to solve problems that were coming up in development. Namely, there's a new scene that's being added, and we don't have the time or budget to go back and re-record some of these lines or record new lines. How can we be smart about using some of the lines in the game in the cinematics that weren't intended for that purpose, but like let's get kind of creative.
I remember you'd mentioned, not in this conversation, but elsewhere, that in the beginning where Travis yells "fuckhead" as he slashes down on the guys, that line wasn't there originally and it had to be put in after the fact. Was that from that period? That
was, absolutely. So I remember that one in particular, and that I think that was added, that whole sequence of him slashing down had been added, or it just felt flat. I do remember there being an issue with that scene takes place and he's not saying anything, or he might have said something weirdly weird that the team had just put in a line there that they thought would be kind of cool for him to say as he's slashing up these guys.
Right.
And I remember going through so many different lines like, maybe we can pop this thing in there. Maybe we can pop this thing in there. And they might have been too long, and then it just didn't want to make any sense that he would say that in motion. And that was the one that we had landed on, so to speak, despite the fact that it doesn't kind of make any sense because it's not plural.
Right.
But we decided that was like the best of pretty poor choices.
For it not being plural, it seems to work pretty well, I think.
I don't think anybody's going to complain.
No, I mean, honestly, you're bringing that up. That was the first time I ever noticed
Yeah, it's so funny how much we belabor over these things, and that ultimately, people are never going to notice, which I guess is part of the point.
Before we wrap up with your story, I just wanted to know, what do you think about the game as a social critique, or if it has that, or what you think about Travis as a character?
You mean, do I think that the game in and of itself is trying to say something?
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. I think it's wrapped and obfuscated in a bunch of strange and intentional kind of red herrings and things like that Suda infused into the script. But I think again, you hit it really well with your analysis that it's a game about identity and figuring out who you are and being pulled in different directions, and watching a guy that I think they try to make him come across as like a kind of a loser, and through or despite the nerd culture, he's able to kind of shed his to break away and become something more than he was originally, and going down that hero's journey.
Right.
I think to a certain extent that they did that, with the exception of, I don't think they did a great job of painting him as like kind of a loser from the very beginning. I think from the very beginning, whether they wanted to or not, he was pretty cool, right? And he's a likable character. I mean, he's a good looking, thin guy who, it's like cool sunglasses, right?
Right.
It's definitely something empathetic about somebody who's just trying his best, and it doesn't start off from that perspective, which I think video games always struggle with, and I think including No More Heroes.
Well, we're reaching the end here, but I'm curious. After No More Heroes, was your relationship with Grasshopper, mainly as an audience member at that point?
Yeah, after No More Heroes, I don't remember going over there for anything else after that. Although I kind of kept in touch over the course of the Shadows of the Dam development. I had helped out with a couple meetings here and there, but with the actual content of the game, the first time I had ever played it was when it was released.
Okay. Well, that brings us to the end of Dr. Peace. Ryan, thank you very much for joining us today.
Well, thanks, Jams.
See you next time, everyone, and play Republic.